What is up, everybody? Ed Gow Jr. here from Dad Central, Ontario with the man of the hour.
Man of the hour, Adam. You mean our guest? Is that what you're talking about?
Sorry, Adam's still waiting. So you are here, like an old song by a group called Van Halen, right here, right now. You the man.
You're right here, right now. Right. Thanks very much, Ed. I'm assuming you're going to say that just because I'm a new dad again. Maybe that's why. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's the first time we're recording since the baby came a little over 2 weeks ago. So yeah, she's doing well.
Excellent. So let's, before we do anything else, we are here. The Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. And I think in the media business, that leads into a lovely little segue because we were at an event that Dove put on just recently.
Yeah, on Thursday, being at the Social Media and Young Minds premiere of an event, a premiere of a video, I should say, was a pretty powerful event. It's amazing, and they open up by saying 1 in 2 children are negatively affected by social media, and I mean, you saw the results of that video and the impact, and so I think it's very important that we're aware of the dangers for our children of social media, and Dove is on a mission to really educate, inform, but also make a difference in how our children interact with and are not so negatively affected by social media. So it was great to be there, and a really wonderful event that they put on.
Yeah,
what are your reflections?
Well, a few reflections. It was great meeting physically a lot of the Edelman team. Kaylin and, Laura. We also met 2 VPs from Edelman also. So it was great to meet them. Also, we had the pleasure of meeting Allison Schaefer. And was she a riot or what?
More energy in person than on camera, but still tons of energy.
She was so much fun, but it was a really great event, and the education and the knowledge. And they had great attendance. Love the venue. I think it was the Paramount. Is that what it was called? Paramount? I think it was Paramount.
Paradise Theater.
Paradise Theater. So it was really great and a lot of informative, a lot of great people doing a lot of great work and just well attended, great reception, great questions. And Drew was the man asking about Dad. So this was a beautiful, I wasn't there, unfortunately, to see it happen, but he asked about what impact dads can make on the Dove campaign. So we're speaking at that. There'll be something coming down the road in regards to that. But yeah, I like the event. And again, it's a growing challenge with the whole world of social media, and even a whole other conversation, the impact of artificial intelligence and young people on social media. But that's another episode. But we have a new friend coming on today, so I'd love you to do the intro.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Today we're going to have Adam Hart. And he's an international speaker and a best-selling author whose mission is to help busy parents transform their quality of life and develop deeply connected relationships with their partners and their children, something that is right in line with our mission here at Dad Central, the Dad Central Show. So Adam focuses on nervous system regulation, energetic attraction, and natural holistic wellness practices. He also leads a group-based coaching program with his 6-step Unleash Your Energy process for living aligned to the best versions of ourselves possible. And I know, Ed, you're an energy guy because you're always saying, don't just manage your time, manage energy. So Adam, looking forward to having him on the show and having a conversation about how he can help.
Well, let's not talk the talk. It's time for Adam to walk the walk. What's going on, Adam?
Right on, guys. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. What's been going on in your world?
Well, I spent the last few days hitting my mountain bike, getting my kids on their bikes, being in nature, being connected to, the abundance of life in general. Not the normal place I used to live, so I'm fortunate that I live there now.
Excellent.
That's great. Well, Adam, we're going to definitely get to pick your brain about how to help us busy parents navigate and have great relationships. But we always like to start the show by getting a little bit of the backstory. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what life was like for you growing up and then how that kind of led to where you are today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I grew up in Toronto, Richmond Hill, and I think there was an element of my upbringing where I didn't have a solid connection to my own health and wellness. I was very much addicted to sugar as a child, addicted to screens, and always looking to escape my life, and diagnosed ADHD in my teens, told I was learning disabled. So there was a big part of my upbringing that had a lot of self-esteem, self-worth, shame, and guilt thoughts. And that kind of perpetuated for me as I eventually, I wanted to be a good boy, do all the right things, do what society told me I should do, which is, you go to school, you get your degree, you get your job, you get the house, you get your kids. And so I kept following that model. And at some point in my 20s, after graduating university, I started to work for a company in Toronto. And I started to experience some pretty extreme bouts of depression and anxiety, and led to an increase in my sugar addiction. And I became pre-diabetic at 25 years old, 50 pounds overweight, and on lots of different medication for, all sorts of different things. And kind of hit my rock bottom moment and realized, wow, okay, if I keep going this direction, I'm going to be in trouble, and I'm already in trouble. So what do I do about this? And, I kept being, and I'm not knocking the system, but there's, I kept being told, you got to start doing more diets. You got to do more fitness programs. You got to maybe meditate. Maybe you got to do yoga. And nothing really ever fit into my life that flowed with ease. It always added a little more angst. Every time I tried a diet, I felt guilty and frustrated. And same with every fitness program I ever tried. I'd miss a day or two, and I'd just be stuck in my own, self-loathing thoughts and guilt, and didn't know a way out. And I got very lucky. And I know we were talking a little bit before we began, but my kind of rock bottom also brought something pretty beautiful into my life that changed the course of where I got to go next. And that was my discovery of rock climbing.
Those early years, and they sound like some of those times were challenging. I'm glad you're an overcomer. Was there any parental support during those times, or, what kept you going?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for a lot of parents of that generation, I call myself a second generation fast food eater.
Okay.
Right. So you think in terms of that style of, just one example of how we are impacted in our health, nutrition is one of those. A lot of the baby boomer generation didn't realize how unhealthy those foods were. And so as children, when you have access to processed foods in that way, it wreaks havoc on our minds and our bodies. And my parents didn't know that. So there was very little support on that front. And then even in terms of the depression and anxiety, most parents, and most of my clients, this is a representation of what they're experiencing. They are stuck in their own reactivity to life. And so it was very difficult for my parents to hold a safe, loving environment for me in terms of how they're reacting to their own life. And this is about nervous system regulation. This is this idea of co-regulation as parents. If we don't know how to regulate our own response to life and then hold space to co-regulate our children, there is very little, safety in their life experience. And so, yeah, I did not grow up with a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ed, keep going.
Yeah. So I don't know how open you want to be with us, but this rock bottom moment, can you, if you're comfortable, give some reflection for our audience on that rock bottom moment, and how did that start leading to the turn?
Yeah. Well, I'd be waking up every morning, and the dread of getting up, knowing that I'd have to go sit in Toronto traffic to get to work, to then,
you don't do that to me right now.
Right.
You do it because I'm still in Toronto, but I do envy you. You don't.
Yeah. Well, hey, I didn't have control over my anxiety, and so I would be stuck in traffic, and it's 7:30 in the morning, and I'd be road raging at 7:30 because I just couldn't deal with my own emotions. And, when you're in that dark cycling of thoughts all the time, it's really difficult to find those windows of escape from that unless you are really diligent in how you do that. And, I just kept going through this Groundhog Day experience where my mind and my body eventually started to collapse. And, the symptoms of that, a lot of brain fog, lack of motivation, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of trying to problem solve thinking, which is a difficult place to work from. Physically, inflamed all the time, and, sugar cravings and all sorts of cravings, and overweight. So, again, for me, it was, okay, what is it that I'm missing that I now know, which is why I'm here, I think, sharing this with you. I was downtown Toronto with a friend of mine. We were just rollerblading around, trying to be active. We were both overweight. And this is when we stumbled onto the indoor rock climbing gym, Joe Rockheads, right downtown Toronto. And the first time I walked in there, I was very nervous. But I recognized, okay, this might be something fun to try. Maybe this will be something I can, get a little healthy around. And again, didn't want to buy another gym membership. And so when we went into the rock climbing gym, I got halfway up the wall and I had a panic attack, and I started sweating, and my heart started palpitating, and I started yelling at my buddy to let me down. And he let me down. But there was something about the experience that I got attracted to. And I went back the next day and I started climbing again and felt a little more at ease with the process. And I kept going back and kept going back. And what I had discovered through that process was every time I was climbing, I wasn't thinking. I was just present in the moment, working with my breath, working with my movement in a way that I didn't realize would make me feel a little more peaceful inside. And so it became an addiction. It was the only way I knew how to feel peaceful was to go climbing. I know a lot more about the biology of that now, but back then it was just my escape. And that was the only way that I knew I could feel better outside of being told I need to be medicated. And I didn't want to be medicated again. So I kept climbing.
Yeah. There are quite a few interesting things that came up for me as you were sharing different stories. I think about, obviously, I have now 5 children, and diet and nutrition is certainly something I think about a lot. We know that sugary, salty, those treats that are convenient and easy to grab, they can easily infiltrate on a regular basis. And then once they get a taste, they want more and more and more of it. So I think it's an important message. I don't want to go past that, as a parent, we do have an important role in both modeling, but also monitoring and ensuring that our children are not getting to the point where that is a constant in their diet, that we've got to make some healthier choices.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I guess stood out to me was, as you're telling that last part of your story, you said, I didn't want to be nervous or anxious. Or, bottom line is you had motivation. And I also heard you saying, I'm trying, you kept trying different things.
Yeah.
You tried new things. What I'm wondering is that sometimes people can't even get to that point. And I'm wondering if you might, have any thoughts or advice on, or not advice, but just thoughts on, what if a person is in that place now who's listening? You're like, man, I don't even have the motivation to go into a rock climbing gym. I don't even have the motivation to, I just want to stay in bed. Yeah. What would you say to that person? Because somehow you had that, and that still drove you to go and find some possible solutions. Yeah.
And it definitely drove motivation. Motivation is a product of mindset. And so if we understand at the core of our health and wellness as a human being, our species, the number one way to optimize our health and wellness is to really deepen our understanding of the relationship between our mindset and our nervous system. Everything in life is being filtered through the nervous system, everything. And so if we understand a little more about how that works and what that means, we actually can start to build daily practices that fuel motivation, that fuel a little more connection to your own energy in a way where you are inspired by the ways that you get to spend your time. And it's also has to be done in a way where it fits into your very busy dad life. And that's very rare to find these days. So I recognize the importance of what this message might be for some of the dads listening to this. But there is a way to start to tune into your own motivation, but it has to come from nourishing the relationship of your mindset with your nervous system as the primary foundation for how that would work.
Okay. Well, of course, my next question then, how would I go about doing that? And however you want to share that with us.
Yeah. Okay. So, and this is a big discussion, but I think in the first part of this is, before we get to the how-to, is understanding that relationship first, the nervous system and the brain. And so the nervous system, we know this, it's called the autonomic nervous system. So there's two main parts of the nervous system: the fight or flight, which is the sympathetic, and the rest and digest, the parasympathetic. Modern society, and the way it's set up, has us pretty much dominated in our life experience inside of which one of those two do you think?
Fight or flight.
Which one?
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight, right? We know that really well, especially if you have kids. It's just a constant state that we're in. So that's going to produce a very reactive way of experiencing your life. The brain is constantly looking for those patterns of reactivity, because when we are reactive to what's happening in our lives, we produce a very dominant hormone called adrenaline. Adrenaline is the number one source of energy for the brain. It's known as a surge of energy, and the brain loves it. And as a survival organ, the brain will learn from your life experiences that are producing it, and it will begin to create a looping pattern of thoughts. So 70,000 thoughts a day is what we have. The majority of those are coming from our own brain, learning what's creating stress in our lives. And then it starts to create these, and we could call this the ego, but it starts to create these stories about our relationships, whether it's our kids, whether it's our partner, about our health, about our finances, about our career. And you'll start to notice that a lot of them have a pattern of reactivity to them. And that's only because the brain has learned that if it produces those thoughts, you're going to react to them. But what we don't realize is that we can actually learn to teach our brain to not do that. We can teach the brain to feel okay and not use adrenaline as its main source of energy. Because the consequence for us, and cognitively you feel this, because when you're in a fight or flight response, your brain isn't functioning properly. Your executive function is turned off. And so you lack motivation. You lack focus and clarity and smart decision making. But you don't realize it because the majority of your life is already in that state, and we don't know the difference. And so we need to start to cultivate in a relationship where we learn the difference. How does it feel to feel at peace? How does it feel to feel motivated, to feel focused on a consistent basis? And the only way to do that is to train your nervous system to live predominantly in the parasympathetic state, the calm, rest and digest state. And so it's like going to the gym and building muscle, but all you're doing here is you're building your parasympathetic muscle. And that's done throughout the day, in the moments of life when your brain is trying to create a problem. That's your training ground. When you come downstairs in the morning and your kids are fighting and you feel the need to react and scream back and control it, that's the moment that you have the ability to teach your brain to let go of your kids as a use of stress and bring peace to the moment, which brings you back into a place of power, brings your energy back online the most efficient way possible. And it puts you in a position where you're actually thinking clean and clear to make the right choices with your kids in that moment. Mm-hmm. And these patterns are endless in our lives, where we have opportunities to work with those reactions that we normally just, we're not present for them. We're just reacting all the time. Right.
As you said that, or described that scene of walking down the stairs, seeing the kids reacting, I pictured, the little Zen moment, right? Instead of jumping in and reacting, you're essentially channeling that, that little Zen moment. Now I'm kind of just making it simple, but
yeah,
I think what you're trying to say is, there is so much power in that process of almost stepping back from the situation, stopping, gathering yourself,
Yeah.
moving to a different place, thought in your thoughts,
Yeah.
and then responding from a place that you want to respond to, as opposed to reacting to, oh my God, the kids again, I'm so sick of this. Why can't they stop fighting, etc. So
Right.
that's the simplified
that's
version.
it. And that's all it has to be. But we keep being fed all these other ways of maybe dealing with how we're feeling about our lives. And yet those just perpetuate the inability to work with this moment in the way that's providing you this really beautiful feeling immediately. Mm-hmm. So essentially what you're doing is you're doing a very particular breath practice that I discovered from rock climbing. So I'd be rock climbing, and I'd be, if anybody who knows Squamish, which is where I live now, West Coast Canada, it's a big granite monolith, very much like what you get in Yosemite, much smaller, but still very high exposure. So 15 years ago, when I'm in very heavily immersed in rock climbing, hours and hours and hours a day climbing for multiple days in a row, for multiple years in a row. So what does that mean exactly? Well, that means that I am training my nervous system for hours and hours a day for years to live at peace in a very anxious scenario. That gave me and still gives me a very unique perspective on how the ability to reset our nervous system is the number one missing link to all of humanity. That's my belief. If we learn how to reset our stress response in the moments of life, the brain is trying to create a response, we get complete freedom back. And you can think of this in terms of our energy. You just stop leaking all your energy. You start to run physically and mentally with a more fluid connection to your real energy source, which is clean, clear thoughts and physical strength and endurance. That's natural to us as human beings, but anxiousness and depressive thoughts deny us the ability to understand this. And so in the moments of life, I'd be up on the side of the wall having a panic attack again. But here I am hundreds of feet up in the air. And that's obviously real fight or flight scenario. You can't have that happen or you could die. And so I kept doing this same breath practice over and over again, intuitively. I'd put my hands on the rock, I'd close my eyes, I'd put my forehead on the rock, and I would just do this breath practice. Really calm myself down. I'd open up my eyes and I would all of a sudden have my power back. I'd feel focused again, feel strong, feel confident, the endurance is back, and I'd be able to keep climbing. And what I did start to learn from that is that I'm able to shift how I'm feeling anxious in this moment. What about, excuse me, what about the other moments in my life where I'm having the same kind of anxiety? For example, when my brain says, "Ooh, Adam, aren't you ready for more sugar? Go get the cookies. Go get the cookies. You want some cookies? Go get the cookies." Next thing I know, I've got cookies in my face and I'm not even taking a moment to notice how I'm being so reactive to my sugar addiction. Okay, well, that was the first place I brought this to. I said, okay, well, what if I started to take a pause before I reacted to eating the sugar and did the same breath practice? Could I reset my stress response around sugar? And it happened immediately. As long as I started to really work with my nervous system, I reduced my brain's use of sugar as a source of reactivity. Now, the breath practice itself, I call it heart flow. It's a 33-second breath practice that helps to reset your nervous system and sends a clean signal up what's known as the vagus nerve that turns the brain back on to its full capacity. And it brings more peace and presence into your life immediately. And you do it in 33 seconds. Now, I don't know how that lands for you, but nobody ever told me when I was growing up, being diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, put on Ritalin in my teens, and living with anxiety and, always told another diet's what I need, another fitness program. And now all of a sudden, here's something that I can do in 33 seconds and shift my life experience. Nobody ever told me that was possible. So my mission is to just really make this really easy for folks to recognize that we have so much more power in our ability to feel healthy every day. It's about working with the moments of life, and you can do it really easily. But it's very challenging because the brain really does not like it.
Well, I have, a couple different thoughts, Ed. I'll go and then you can pop in after. How's that sound?
Sure.
Yeah. So I love simplicity. I love practical. And what you've just given us is something, as you said, 33 seconds and very practical, because you can apply this in literally any moment of the day where you notice yourself getting pulled down that rabbit hole or that traditional pattern that you've been going, and using the breath. It's very similar to, I've taken a course from Dr. Laura Markham, and her basically mantra is, stop, drop, and breathe in those moments, and you're essentially triggered. Yeah. It's the same thing, but yours is, again, very specific. I love the time component of it, and obviously there's probably key elements. So certainly very powerful. My question to you is this: what am I doing with my thoughts during those 33 seconds?
Yeah.
And how do I do that in a way that supports the breath work and not hinders the breath work?
Yeah. And I love that you asked that. And this takes practice. And so I have a 6-step process that I put all my clients through. The first one is you want to start to map out where you're feeling triggered. Where do you notice that your mind likes to take you to as often as it does, whether it's your relationship with your partner, which is the number one reason why marriages end in separation, is the lack of real coherent communication. Once the brain starts to learn that your partner is a source of stress, it's a tricky one because there's a lot of resentment that comes in those thoughts. And so if we don't learn those patterns and start to work with them, we won't find an escape from how they're making us feel. So our relationships, our finances, our career, and our health. And if you pull back for a moment, and when I work with my clients, we do this mind mapping where they start to recognize, okay, my biggest pattern around my relationships is this: my reactivity to my kids or my partner. Around my health, well, I've got this belly fat now that I'm really upset about. Okay, that's the one we're working with. Same with career. And then what you want to do is you also want to start to notice the habits that you turn to feel a little bit or a lot better. What are the key habits that you turn to? And there's always one or two dominant habits. Most right now, to be honest, is still sugar and social media, even for adults. Obviously, we know that those are the same two for kids as well. So at that point, once you start to map those out, now you want to pick just one to start working with. And the one that you start picking is the one that you're now going to bring this heart flow breath practice into your day every time that trigger shows up in your mind. It's not perfect, but you're going to notice it at least 3-4 times. And the idea is all you really need to do is 3 times or more every day is practice that. And you will start to notice a really powerful shift in how you feel. It's going to immediately start to bring more presence into some other habits as well, or other thought processes that you can start to work with. Now, when you're doing the breath practice, the key here is that you now also want to start to put the gratitude of how you want that whatever that is that's impacting you, how would you like it to be? So if it's with your partner and you say, you know what, every time I come downstairs and the kitchen sink's full of stuff and it's all messy everywhere, and man, my partner doesn't really respect me, doesn't think about me, I'm always doing the dishes, whatever it likes to say, that's the moment where you practice. Okay, putting my hand on my heart, that's part of the process. And I'm happy to give you guys a link to download the breath practice. There's 5 steps in particular. The first one is really just be present, close your eyes, put your hand on your heart. And you want to, as you do the breath, it's 4 seconds in, 7 seconds out, 4 in, 7 out, 4 in, 7 out. So 3 rotations. And you're also starting to feel into how it is that you want this moment to be as an alternative. So if you're there with your partner and it's her or him that's making you a little bit crazy, okay, how do I want my relationship to be and how do I want it to feel? And you'll notice that as you learn how to tune into the emotions of what you do want, that begins to have a really powerful energy on its own as well. And in modern society, we're very good at knowing what we don't want and very confused about what we do want, or spend very little time focused on what we do want. There's a power to adding that into the process.
All right, Ed, I lied. I'm going to hop in here just because I feel a little bit validated here. So I'm going to say one of the things that Kristen and I talk about, so many times she'll express what she doesn't want. And I always say, okay, I hear and I listen. I'm like, okay, but So what do you do? What do you want?
Yeah.
And how can we begin to think about what you want and then being able to move towards that? So I'm going to pat my back a little bit. Okay. Thank you, Adam. Apparently I've been doing something positive. That's good. Back to you, Ed.
No problem. So, Adam, let me ask, I'm going to build a little journey here. Were you doing these practices before you became a dad?
Yes.
So how has these practices helped your fatherhood journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a beautiful one. My brain has definitely learned that my kids can be a source of stress. Right. And so it will constantly look for patterns of where I'm a little bit or a lot reactive to my kids and try and produce more thoughts around that. So it keeps feeding off of my fight or flight stress response. My role is to keep noticing, okay, when am I feeling anxious? And at what points is it related to my kids? The number one that showed up a lot for me was nighttime, and nighttime in relation to bedtime routine. My mind loved to produce thoughts that had me thinking about all the other things I needed to do outside of putting my kids to bed. I want to watch the hockey game. I got this to do. I got that to do. Why do I have to be putting you to bed all the time, guys? You guys go to bed. Anyway, so I started to really recognize how my brain was triggering me and revving me up in those moments. And I said to myself, working in the way that I work in terms of these patterns, I said, okay, that's the pattern I'm going to pick for right now to focus on. And every night, and this was about a week or 2 weeks where every night I'd be in bed with them and I would be doing this breath practice over and over and over, calming my mind down from wanting me to be somewhere else, really cultivating a deep connection to being present. And what it did is it provided all of a sudden this space where my kids weren't nearly as anxious about bedtime. They weren't falling asleep in usually like 30, 40 minutes. It was more like 5-10 minutes. And that really got me a little more deeply connected to this power of co-regulation, of recognizing how important it is for me to not be a source of reactivity energetically for them. My nervous system being revved up and triggered is going to make their nervous system being the same way, and their brain learning that, wow, if I poke daddy this way or that way, I'm going to get a trigger out of them. And so their little brains are ramping up thoughts of, I'm going to keep poking daddy where I can. But if we recognize that we can reset that and not be part of the reactivity, our kids don't use us as much as a source of reactivity. So that was a big way that I began to dive into the understanding of regulating myself around them. And so then there became other practices I started to implement for myself, but also for the kids, because I wanted them to learn, okay, so what did I learn climbing in terms of how to regulate myself, and what can I bring in that's going to give you a little bit of a feeling of that? And the first thing we brought in was a balance board. So as an example, you put a balance board in your living room and get your kids to play with a balance board. You can go online, there's hundreds of them. But all you're doing is you're connecting yourself to your own balance, natural human ability to balance, which ultimately takes you out of your mind and into your body. And it forces your kids to start to recognize breath as a way to get better at that. But if you know what it's actually doing, which is teaching them how to reset their nervous system, you can, through the communication, you can teach them that they're actually doing one of the most powerful biological things possible, whether you're a child or an adult, learning how to regulate yourself in that moment. Slacklining is another one that we've set up slack lines in our backyard, and the kids, they walk a slack line, and it's the same kind of presence it drops you into that a lot of other activities that we do don't give you access to.
Where would you be without all of this as a father?
Oh boy. I mean, if I was still living the same reactive way from the past, I'd probably be dead by now, to be honest. Like I was in such rough shape. And knowing how much of modern society has us stuck in a fraction of our human and health potential. Again, recognizing how important it is to be regulated myself to all the things that are happening in life and not letting my brain run amok all the time. I know now that I live predominantly in my parasympathetic rest and digest state, which is where we're supposed to live. And that has a energy to it that's very fulfilling. It's got a very beautiful energy of feeling like I'm in a state of growth and feeling fulfilled. And I know that's what I provide for my kids as well. Then the opposite of that is, it's chaos. It's a lot of just feeling frustrated, a lot of frantic energy. And that if you are living that way, you're going to have symptoms mentally and physically. And that's the primary way to know how you're doing with presence, with your parasympathetic versus sympathetic. The more you recognize your own symptoms and don't get caught trying to chase a way to fix them. Like if you gain weight, it's not a diet. It's not another fitness program. It's working with your nervous system to give it the space to heal you the way it wants to heal you, which it can do and has the power to do. You can look at fitness and nutrition and all those things after, but if you look at those as your primary way of getting healthy, you're just adding fuel for your brain to use it to create stress around.
I just want to ask another conversation piece. You see many different clients. Just out of curiosity, are there some common challenges that the dads you work with come to you about?
Yeah. And the majority of them are coming because of, they've gotten to a point where they recognize that their self-care has gotten really, really lost in the process. Yeah. And they're committed to their self-care, but they just can't find a way to bring it back in. Like myself, they've tried lots of different diets and different fitness programs and different 3-day raw men's retreats and stuff. And yet it still hasn't got them to a place where they've got more ease and flow with their lives. And recognizing too that their dominant habits are not serving them and they want to find a way out where it doesn't have to be so hard.
Good. I know Drew wants to jump in, so I will sit down.
Thanks, Ed. Well, just as we move towards the end of the conversation, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the power of nature to support this process you're talking about.
Yeah, it's great. I really appreciate that question too. And, I have a really close friend out in Victoria who runs a nature-based therapy program, a not-for-profit. And I got to go out and spend time with him last week and watched a very powerful presentation from a clinical psychologist. Her name is Sue Johnson. She wrote some really amazing books on bonding and family bonding. Mm-hmm. And that discussion around bonding really hit me in a way where I recognized, this is really a really big missing link to our human experience right now. And a lot of it has to do with our disconnect to nature. And we don't realize how powerful nature is in regulating our nervous system stress response and bringing us back to a place of peace and calm. But we know when we go outside, we're not meant to be indoors as we are, whether it's in our cars, in our house, in our offices. And it's not that we need to go live outside in caves, but we have to recognize that nature has a way of self-regulating us and co-regulating us the same way that we as parents should understand provides us with a feeling of feeling grounded that we can then bring into the home front in a way where our kids feel more of that. Mm-hmm. And so any chance we can get out in nature and be grounded in nature, and being grounded, it's even taking off your shoes and being barefoot on the ground, which is a natural way for us to experience that connection. You feel it. You do feel a significant shift in how your mind and body work, and ultimately should lead you to be motivated to be more in nature, which is what it did for me, but also teach you what you're doing. What is it providing that you can learn your own biology in a way where you can bring that same feeling everywhere?
Mm. No, I love that. I pick up on that, and I've mentioned it periodically that one of the greatest trips I took was about 3 weeks before the pandemic hit, and I went to Yellowknife. Mm. And learning and being immersed in the indigenous culture for a week. And one of the two common words I heard all the time was the land, the land.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten really disconnected from our roots, the tribal or communal living that it once was, where we had elders to learn from, and we were all, in a very particular relationship with one another, bonding. And now we know with modern society, especially the last couple hundred years, it's very, very much about, especially the last, you think about the last 3-4 years in the terms of isolation and loneliness. It's not our natural life experience, but yet the brain learns from that and locks us into anxiety around it unless we know how to shift that relationship. And, there's a big part of, in my process, it's all about building this strong foundation. I talked about those 6 steps. The first 5 steps are all around nervous system and brain regulation. Then you can look at, how can I optimize this? And that's the last step is, okay, how can I use nature? How can I use nutrition? How can I use sleep? How can I use my relationships, my fitness in a way to facilitate even more resilience around this, versus picking one of those areas and putting all your energy and all your eggs in that one basket of, let's say, nutrition, and hoping it's going to help you. It's like, okay, well, let's get the nervous system online first, and then you can start to look at nature and all those other areas to further enhance your experience with it, which ultimately is about feeling at peace, feeling present with how you're showing up, and recognizing that that's the place where you get real clear, motivated thoughts in a way where your actions are so much more inspiring for yourself and those around you.
Good stuff.
Nice. Well, maybe on that point, Adam, we'll really just say thank you for sharing with us and sharing with our audience. I have at least 3 takeaways that I know I'm going to begin applying more based on this conversation. So I hope that anyone who's listening has taken notes and really looking at where they can begin to apply these, I think, very crucial practices in what could be a very busy, hectic, challenging, life that they're experiencing, to find some more of that peace, to find less reactivity, and to be able to respond and train themselves to regulate and co-regulate with the people who are close to them. So very important message. So last question, I guess, is, if people want to learn more about you and get connected, where can they do that?
Yeah, my website is the spot, clearimpact.io, clearimpact.io. There is a free download of the 6 steps. We went over a few of them. And so anybody who this resonates with, there's some great next step stuff in that PDF for you.
Well, Adam, we'd like to say again, as Drew said, thank you for sharing, and thanks everything for what you have done, are doing, and will be doing with fathers, families, to make them in a better place. You've indirectly challenged me to do some rock climbing. I don't know if I'm going to get there, maybe in an indoor spot, but maybe I'll get there one day. But thank you again for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule. And if there's anything we can do to help you move forward, not only family-wise, but community-wise, we're here to help you out.
Hey, listen, I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
And thanks for reaching out to us, by the way. We appreciate that too. Take care.
Right on.
Bye-bye. All right, Mr. Drew, what's going on?
There's so much good that Adam shared, and really important fundamental practices. So much. I thought of some situations as he was describing things. I'm like, oh yeah, that was me. That was me, reactivity versus responding. Okay, yep, my thoughts. Where are my thoughts here? Especially now with a newborn, right? So she's a little over 2 weeks old, and just the last 2 days, not sleeping very well at all at night, sleeping great during the day. So there are just some moments that, you find yourself, your thoughts moving to different places. And it's a great reminder, I think, of some principles that I was aware of, but hadn't been practicing as much. And so I really valued just the chance to have the conversation, but the very practical and very doable, literally every single day. You could practice what Adam's talking about. And I think you need to do that every single day to begin moving to a healthier place, not only for yourself, but in particular, I love the story about bedtime with the kids. And I know from my own experience, I was in that same place, all these other thoughts, all these other things. And then when I, similar to him, a little bit of a different practice, but similar to him, shifted my thoughts to a different place, the kids would just fall asleep like magically so quickly, as opposed to if I wasn't in that same place. So the ability and importance of co-regulating as a parent can have a significant impact in the day-to-day moments, in the moments that are typically stressful. And bedtime is one of those ones usually where it can be challenging. So if you can apply this, I think as a dad, you will find yourself in a much better place and enjoying things much more. So very important stuff from my perspective.
Yeah, I'll just make it fairly short and sweet. I'm a firm believer in dads in taking time to invest in themselves. And the better they are to themselves, the better they can be for their children and their family. And I'm just saying, small little practices can lead to big victories. So the small wins lead to big wins. 33-second wins. Not 33 minutes, dads. 33 seconds. And I highly encourage to go to his website and use that resource, but the small little wins, because with dads, it all starts with you.
I got one more thing that I wanted to add. Don't want to miss this. The two key culprits I think you talked about.
Yes.
Social media and sugar.
Sugar. Yes.
Okay? Social media and sugar.
Yes. Not text messaging.
Limit those things. Limit them. Monitor them. Be intentional with what you're allowing or working with your children on those two areas.
Yeah. Limits and, boundaries and intentionality, all those things wrapped up in there. I know Adam did a very good job in highlighting those as great take home. So as always, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. If you want to touch base with us, and we'd love you to, we have an email address, podcast@dadcentral.ca. Tell us what you like, where there are opportunities, and tell us if there's guests you want to have on the show. Speaking of the show, you can watch us at dadcentral.ca/podcast. And we have piles of a lot of free resources on dadcentral.ca. So as always, remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and we'll see you soon. Take care and be well.